In New York with me is the veterans advocate Paul Rieckhoff. Paul trained at Fort Stewart before his deployment to Iraq years ago. So your thoughts today as we watch these. Still a lot we don't know, but what we do know is terrible. 5 soldiers have been shot, and reports indicate it may have been a soldier who did the shooting.
Yeah, terrible tragedy. I think it's a brutal reminder that nowhere is safe in America, especially for our troops. They are targets for any number of reasons, and serving in our military is an extremely dangerous job, no matter what the situation. Fort Stewart's enormous.
Right.
It's about over 200,000 acres. I think it's about 39 miles across. I've driven across it during training, and it's a massive place. I think an important reminder is, I think we'll find out over the next couple of hours that everybody there is trained as a first responder. Every soldier on base knows how to do basic first aid, knows how to do CPR, and they probably saved lives. I think that, every time you focus on the shooter, but I also want to focus on the helpers, the folks that ran in, and this might be a really amazing demonstration of how good our soldiers are, especially in dealing with trauma.
We're getting a sense from that Google Earth image on the screen next to Paul of Fort Stewart. If we can go to our tablet that I have in front of me and take that full for a moment, you'll get a better idea of where Fort Stewart is. This is Savannah. So if you just move about 40 miles or so southwest, this is Fort Stewart, okay? So it's a big Army base. Even from there, you can tell. And if we go to this map, so you heard Laura referring to 2nd Brigade up here, where the shooting is thought to have taken place, has its own airfield there, the Fort Stewart Hunter Army Airfield. All of this was on lockdown. Lockdowns have been cleared. Memories for yourself of being at Fort Stewart? Like I said, you were there, right before you went to Iraq?
Yeah, I mean, it's a critical base. It's the biggest base, I think, east of the Mississippi. A lot of units are going in and out. You've also got Hunter Army Airfield there, where aviation assets are located. Where the Brigade Combat Team has a lot of different stuff. There are ranges there. There's a lot of access to weapons. Anything really could have happened. But I think if you're talking about, for example, an infantry unit, everybody's got access to weapons. So I think it's really critical that we don't jump to conclusions about what happened here. But suffice to say, there's a lot of access to weapons, a lot of people in a small area, and a lot of people moving in and out. But it is hard to get in and out of an active duty military base. I was at West Point just last week. It's hard to get on and off. You can't just drive in if you're anybody, and there's usually checkpoints that should be in place to screen folks.
It's the unfortunate part about all of this, and we have another map here that shows the shootings that have taken place over the years. We've covered these before at military installations. Remember Fort Hood, both in 09 and 2014, and Pensacola, the Washington Naval Yard, that many of these are carried out either by, in this case it appears to be a soldier, or someone who had access, someone like a contractor.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, right? I mean, but you've got a lot of access to weapons. You got a lot of people moving in and out. There has been an effort from extremist groups to try to infiltrate our military. We don't know that that's the case here, but I'm sure they're checking backgrounds on everybody in and around right now to find out why, if this was some kind of an insider attack, what that person's identity was. I think the military will probably release their identity as soon as possible. We'll get their full military history, and we'll have a much better picture. But right now, thoughts and prayers with those folks, but also respect and appreciation for how many lives were likely saved in this situation that we won't find out about.
Yeah, thank goodness we don't know of any lives lost in this situation. We know 5 soldiers shot. We don't know very much about their conditions, but hopefully, of course, that they're okay. It does sometimes allow us to talk about wider issues that are of interest in something you've talked about, even though it may or may not apply directly in this situation. Like, for example, mental health in the military and the issues that surround that. I know it's something you've done a lot of advocacy work surrounding.
Yeah, mental health is a concern for, I think, everybody in America, but especially for our soldiers and troops who've been exposed to trauma multiple times. But I think it's also important to remember in situations where folks have PTSD or they've been exposed to trauma, they're more likely to hurt themselves than others. I think sometimes there's a lot of scaremongering going on. The crazy vet syndrome is something we've been tackling for many decades. And before we jump to any conclusions like that, we really got to unpack this situation. And most of all, just understand, being in the military is an extremely dangerous job. And actually, if you were going to get shot, I'd want to get shot on a military base, because everyone knows how to deal with it. Everyone knows how to deal with gunshot wounds. Everybody knows how to deal with trauma. And the teamwork and the unity and the responsiveness will be like nothing else you see anywhere else.
See on the screen at the bottom, they're setting up for that news conference, and maybe they fill in some blanks. Maybe there's some things that we don't know that they'll tell us about. But always after incidents like this, whether they're on a military base or it's the shooting at the office building here in New York that we covered last week, that you start asking questions about what could be done differently. How can you secure these facilities more efficiently? And sometimes there's an answer, and sometimes there's not. Sometimes the answer is as simple as tragedies happen, and we have to learn from that and deal with that. Again, some things we don't know here, but what would you say about security on military bases in general?
It's higher than almost anywhere else in America, right? But I also think that they'll do a full review and see if there could have been steps put in place to make things more secure. I also think incidents like this, including the one in Midtown, underscore the courage that exists in this country. I think over the last few years we've become somewhat accustomed to shootings, but people are responding differently. They're going after the shooters. They're running in to help others. And I think that there's a toughness in our culture that has started to evolve in response to this threat that's become much more normal. I wish we didn't have to do it, but everyday Americans are stepping up in heroic ways. We saw that with the NYPD officer last week, and I think now you'll see it again with troops and maybe contractors and civilians that were there that ran in when others were running out.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you're in the middle of covering or talking about something like this, like we have been. Nick Smith was on earlier, and we're on now on live TV. There's so much you don't know, but that's the story afterwards. It's always like, well, this could have happened, but somebody did this. This was horrible, but it could have been this. It always, almost always, could have been worse.
It's a moment of tragedy, but it's almost always also a moment of courage.
Right.
Somebody stepped up and did something that saved lives. So far, nobody's reported dead, and I think we'll find out over time. And I think it's a reminder. Our military folks are especially heroic, and if there was ever a group of people you want to respond to a situation like this, it's going to be the folks who are at Fort Stewart.
You wonder that everybody surviving speaks at all. Again, we don't know yet, but it speaks at all to what access or what types of weapons someone on post at a military installation would have access to. Is that a question worth looking at?
I think it is.
In other words, when you were on a military base, when you're in active duty, would you have access to all weapons or certain weapons? I mean, how does that even work?
I mean, yeah, I was in an infantry unit, so we had, high-power machine guns. You had pistols.
All the time.
Not all the time. They were usually put in armories, and they were handled very, very, very specifically. But I think what's also really interesting here is that the military is tremendously advanced on trauma response. So you're going to hear about the medics who have the best treatment in the world, the best training in the world on how to stop a gunshot wound, right? On how to deal with someone who's bleeding out, on how to do a tourniquet. These are people who are training on those situations every single day, and they probably thought they were going to have to do it in Afghanistan or Iraq or somewhere in the Middle East. They didn't think they were going to have to do it at home, but when that moment came, they rose to it, and they put that training and that trauma to the test, that trauma training to the... There's an old saying, the only victor in war is medicine. Yeah. And we've seen that especially in the U.S. military. Our trauma medicine has advanced tremendously since 9/11, and I'm sure we'll learn more about that in the hours to come.
I find it fascinating almost all the time how quickly that training kicks in if you have it for people, no matter where they are. Could be on a passenger train.
They could have been training at the time.
Right.
That's possible as well, right? It's constant training. It's constant scenario planning, and they are ready for anything. And now in 2025, it's not just foreign, it's also domestic, and they're ready for it.
Yeah, because sometimes in the civilian world, we look around and it takes us a minute just because we are civilians to say, hey, what really happened? What should I do? And that's sometimes the minute or two that you need. But usually in these situations, those are the people.
Yeah, I mean, look, our troops are heroes. And it could be a car crash. It could be a baby being born. They're running into wildfires. I think it's a really important reminder of how many things we ask them to do in modern American society. They're on the border. They're being deployed overseas. This is a new reality for the American soldier and troop of all branches. And if anything, we should give them more respect now than recently.
Hopefully these 5 that were shot are going to be okay. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah,
Paul
thank you,
Rykov here in New York. We'll get more updates on this shooting, including a live news conference, bottom of the hour at that main gate to Fort Stewart in Georgia. Keep it here on News Nation now as our coverage continues. We're coming right back.